Call the regular council meeting of December 11th to order. There is one late item to add to the list, and that will go in as item number 7C, as in Charlie. It's the 2023 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw, number 3525. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Randawa, Councillor Forrester, any other additions or deletions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We move on to a presentation from the Port of Prince Rupert. Come on forward. I think you're more than familiar with the setup there, but make sure the microphone's on. Introduce yourself, of course.
I just wanted to do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me on that end?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I was communicating via emojis before. It's very reflective of my generation.
And so if I just click, that'll run with me?
Yeah, and if you just, if it's easier, you can just use that on.
Sure, got it, okay.
Well, thank you very much for
Pull the microphone over a little closer. Yeah.
well, thank you very much for having us tonight. Great opportunity to provide you a bit of an update on the past year with the Port of Prince Rupert. I'm Sean Stevenson, President and CEO, and I'm joined by my colleague Ken Veldman, who's our Vice President of Public Affairs and Sustainability. We want to take the next 10 minutes or so just to get a brief update of the past year, some of the things that, what the challenges and opportunities that we're working on as we continue to work to grow and expand the Port of Prince Rupert. Maybe over to you, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do have a presentation. We'll keep this as tight as possible so we can have some questions and conversation afterwards as necessary. There we go. So just some of the standard pieces just to start us off. Of course, as a reminder, we're created underneath the Canada Marine Act with a mandate to enable Canadian trade. And more specifically, we are responsible for the overall planning, development, marketing, and management of commercial port facilities. Over the last 20 years, generally speaking, the Port Authority within this model, this is certainly the Prince Rupert Port Authority has certainly borne out as being one of the, I'd say, poster children, if you will, for what the government of the day envisioned as they established port authorities as these quasi-independent agencies. Obviously, all of you are quite familiar that we've got 6 primary terminals here in Prince Rupert. What they represent beyond just the cargo they move is diversification. Each and every one of these represents different cargoes from different industries, different lines of business, different modes of transportation within global supply chains that range everywhere from cruise to dry bulk to liquid bulk to, of course, intermodal and containers. And as an aggregate, that group of terminals ship about $60 billion every year in annual trade based on our last economic impact study that we did. And that trade spins off a lot of economic and employment benefits, both here in Prince Rupert and across northern BC. In Prince Rupert, there's about 1,700 jobs that are represented, representing over $500 million in labor and wages. And more from a local government perspective, that represents about $12 million in a variety of revenues that come through to the 2 local governments here in this specific region. And we'll talk a little bit about growth and diversification in the operation of the port, but just a couple notes that, it's not just our growth, but how we grow. That's important to us, and certainly something that we had a lot of focus on within our environmental sustainability portfolio is decarbonization. And certainly there are other priorities within it, but I think that all of you certainly recognize the climate crisis that we are in on a global level, and certainly we have a role to play in terms of a port and decarbonizing our operations. We have a goal of decarbonizing total port emissions by 30% by 2030. It's a very aggressive goal, and that's a milestone on the way to becoming a net zero port by 2050. A couple big moves within the last year. One was the development and opening of the connector road to Ridley, and that was a development that people often don't think of as a decarbonization effort, but certainly amongst many benefits, one of the elements there is that we're significantly reducing the amount of emissions that come from truck drayage in the container space. Another big move that we made over the last year was investing in excess of $7 million into a full shore power package at Fairview and bringing that fully up to modern standards. Obviously, vessels make up about 80% of our emissions as a port. So to be able to take container vessels and being very large vessels, and by extension having very large emission footprints, being able to ensure that they have the ability to hook up to clean electricity here in Prince Rupert as opposed to running their engines at berth is a significant advantage for us. And looking forward, this year is going to be very focused on renewable diesel pilots as a drop-in fuel to replace diesel on the marine side, the rail side, the truck and cargo handling side. It's a really significant opportunity for us. But also looking at new technologies and new equipment in terms of electric, hydrogen and hydrogen hybrid trucks as well, and running some pilots along those elements as well as those kind of technologies inch closer towards commercialization. I think you're all probably very familiar with our Community Investment Fund, which is one of our flagships in terms of our community engagement portfolio. After last year, we've now dedicated $17.5 million to this fund since it first opened up in 2010. That's enabled over 100 projects completed to date. We have several in the development phase right now. And importantly, that allows us to partner with over 70 community organizations during that time to get those done. Mostly volunteer organizations, and it's something that we're inordinately proud of within that portfolio. All of that being said, it has been a bit of a tough year when it comes to port operations. Certainly I think most of you are aware that in particular our container volumes are down to probably under 800,000 TEUs this year. And to put that into context, just in 2020 we were almost at 1.2 million TEUs. And of course, volume is very associated with employment, economic benefits, obviously profits from a private sector perspective. And so this represents a very significant downturn. And to keep it in context, going back to the earlier slide of 6 terminals, et cetera, we've made a concerted effort to ensure that development here in the port has been diversified over the years. This year, as marked as it's been by a tough year in the intermodal space, Trigon, PRG, AltaGas, Drax, a cruise terminal have all done extremely well this year. So there are bright spots within the mix, and that's the value of diversification, that even in a very difficult year, you still have stabilizing lines of business. And there have been many years where that's been flipped, where those kind of terminals have had very difficult years, and it's been intermodal that's floated the boat. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. But that being said, we all know how important the intermodal space is to this community, and certainly we're working hard with our partners right now to ensure that over the last 3 years of COVID, for a gateway that's based on a value proposition of speed, reliability, total cost of a supply chain. Those have been very tough years on that value proposition, and we've got some work to do to reestablish that reputation, that brand, that value proposition to gain some market share back. This has been a tough year right across the coast, but there's no denying the fact that we have lost market share as a gateway, and we need to make that back as Team Prince Rupert. That being said, there's also a bigger picture here as we look into the medium term and the long term. And you know, this image here you've probably seen before. And what it really represents is the fact that we're developing a whole port, and every development, every investment that we work to attract is based on projects that fit within a integrated planned complex to ensure that every new investment or terminal that comes in doesn't compromise value propositions for existing terminals or for future terminals, and that speed, reliability, that fluidity of our complex remains. A couple of really big projects that have made some big advancements in the last year. First and foremost, RIELP, Ridley Island Export Logistics Project. This is an announcement we made about 2 months ago of moving into construction on this project. It's a $750 million project, which is a significant number. But what it also represents is diversification within the mode. You know, one of our big challenges right now when we look at our value proposition is that we ship too much empties. We need a better balance of exports. And not only does that assist with export shippers across Canada, Western Canada in particular, as we look at plastic resins and agri and forestry products, but what it also represents is the fact that if there are full containers going out, we are much more likely to attract full imports coming in, because a balanced trade piece is a much more attractive value proposition for carriers. What this also gets us into is this whole concept of logistics, adding more flexibility for shippers when their product is at port, whether that's on the export or the import side. They have more options. We can add more value locally. This is going to be a big focus for us going forward to ensure that we're maximizing the market we can tap into, and that we've got an innovative complex to be able to really take advantage of that market share opportunity that's in front of us. When we talk about diversification within industries, let's also talk about energy. You know, the establishment both of Pembina and of AltaGas here in Prince Rupert has really helped develop a market for Western Canada when it comes to exporting propane. A third of Japan's imports right now come from Prince Rupert when it comes to propane. We've established this supply chain and this market. And what it represents is a beachhead into global demand for lower carbon energies. And certainly propane, LPGs, butane, but also starting to look at other methanol or other bulk liquids like methanol. This is where global demand is going. And this facility, the Ridley Island Energy Export Facility, which you may have previously known as VOPAC, is exactly that. It's a $1 billion investment that we are looking towards a final investment decision on in the spring of 2024. That being said, you know, we've got a proponent that is making significant investments already, both in terms of the multiple years of moving its way through a development process, engineering and design, and just last week beginning early works within their site on Ridley Island. And last but not least, I think you all know we've had a very good cruise here. And again, continuing that diversification theme, in this case, we're looking at tourism, which is a very different industry again, but obviously associated with the port. We did 80,000 passengers this year. That's the highest number we've done since the 2000s. And what it represents is a very strong and growing Alaska cruise market. It represents the fact that many traditional ports of call are running into some capacity issues and being able to handle more and more, and the industry is looking for new destinations to bring their visitors to. And certainly last year was a really good test of that. We have a new terminal operator in the cruise space, Global Ports Holdings. And, you know, certainly they did a very good job in their first year of bringing this forward. And just to punctuate what this means, 80,000 passengers was the equivalent of essentially a windfall of over $7 million in passenger spending last year by our estimates. And we believe that as we investigate what kind of investment it's going to take, that this has a potential to move up to even 400,000 passengers a year. That's not going to happen next year. But that's where the opportunity lies for us in terms of the golden ring in this sector. And And we're actively investigating what that looks like. And if we can achieve that, in addition to that, passenger spending within retail and food and beverage, and obviously tour operators, opportunities for community infrastructure renewal, opportunities for local attraction development in terms of new businesses, right? But also the potential to make big steps towards the Vision 2030 plan. You know, the development of Cow Bay in the 2000s was directly correlated with cruise development at that time. And you take that same association, that's what this kind of growth can also mean for this community. So it's not just dollars and cents. It's being able to do almost a multi-account accounting of what those benefits could be. So big year, you know, going forward, you know, we're certainly committed to ensuring that we continue to work with local governments, including the city of Prince Rupert. Obviously, municipal water infrastructure is something that, and appreciate the mayor's comments over the last couple of months of being shoulder to shoulder on this issue. You know, we've got some work still in front of us, but we've been able to take some significant steps to date, and that's been really encouraging. You know, we continue to do some planning in common in terms of potential for emergency response services and how we can get some win-win solutions there. And certainly looking at civic amenities more generally speaking, whether that's through the Community Investment Fund or other arenas, how can we make some steps there? Generally speaking, I think we're also very aligned that the more that we can turn vacant lands into taxable new industries, I think we're very aligned from that perspective. And whether that be any of the portfolio that we rolled out today or otherwise, we think we've got some significant opportunity to do that, as well as think about the port ecosystem of support businesses and how do we start to accelerate and juice that. I think there's some real economic development opportunities there. And certainly last but not least, as we talk about diversification, it also means new jobs, new kinds of jobs. It's going to have a demand for training. We're a small community and we need to make sure that, you know, that alignment between, you know, our local labor force and the skills that are going to be required. How do we continue to recruit people as needed? That whole package is going to be something that's going to absolutely be a focus for us as we attract new investment, and it's certainly not something that can be done alone. And so we certainly look forward to what kind of partnerships can we establish with the city and other local governments to be able to achieve that. So yeah, it's been a fruitful year. We've been busy, as I know you have as well, and we truly believe that even though the last 15 years have been marked by a lot of success, and this year has been marked by some specific challenges, we do believe that the next decade is going to be even our strongest one yet. So thank you very much, and we welcome any questions.
Councillor Forster.
Thanks. I have quite a few questions, but in order to let everybody have a turn, I'll keep it to 3 maybe.
Okay.
First one, what is TEU? It's I've used it several times, but I have no idea what that means.
Excellent question. In the intermodal space, the amount of containers are measured by a unit called 20-foot equivalent units.
Okay.
So if you look around town, most of the containers you see are actually 40-foot containers. That's your standard shipping container on a vessel. So it counts as 2 TEUs. But you'll also see some 20-foot ones. That's largely used for agriculture, a lot in exports in particular. Heavier type ones will be in a 20-foot equivalent unit specifically. You'll also see 53s out there. They're normally on trucks and used domestically. So when we talk about TEUs, it's a measure of the volume of containers. So 1 million TEUs based on that standard 40-foot usually means 500,000 containers.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before you keep going,
Yep.
can we get Councillor Skelton Morgan back up on the? Thank you. Keep going, Councillor Forster.
One of your first slides, you showed that since 2010, the company has invested 17.5 million in our area. So that's about 1.5 million a year. When I look at other industries across the north, that seems low, right? If I look at what Alcan invests in Kitimat, 1.5 million, it seems to me like they maybe invest a bit more. Is that accurate? Like, where are you in
I
comparison?
am not familiar with the full extent of Alcan's community investment program. I would challenge you that they're actually spending more than 1.5 specifically on a capital community investment program. Obviously, this isn't about private sector investment into business. This isn't about taxation dollars. It doesn't even include all of our donations and such.
Okay.
But in terms of a standard capital dedicated community investment program, I would say for a company our size, in a community this size, I'd say it's certainly one of the largest in the country, quite frankly.
Okay.
But I stand to be corrected if Alcan's is bigger than that.
I was just using Alcan as
Yeah.
as an example. It's just 17.5 sounds really big, and 1.5 sounds really big. I'm not disputing that. I'm just trying to figure out what does that mean for local people in our community?
Well, I think it's important to point out again. Ken mentioned that's not the investments we're making in port infrastructure, businesses, and so forth. That is actually just a dedicated portion of our annual net income that's approved by our board of directors every year to make available for community-driven projects. And I'm not familiar with any organization, company in northern BC that has an equivalent program, or on a proportional basis, given the size of our operation, would have anything close to that.
No.
Yeah.
And to give you an example, the type of projects that we support, it's everything from, we just finished one with Northern Healthcare in Acropolis Manor called the Dementiability Project. So that is an example. But we've done multiple ones with either the health authority or with the hospital itself, almost to the tune of $700,000 or $800,000 over the years, and that's been equipment, rooms, et cetera, et cetera. Sports fields. Every single community playground in town at schools has been a function of those kind of projects. Environmental projects.
The Lesser Center roof,
The Lester
the
Center,
stage,
amongst
the seating, Rushbrook Trail.
Yes. So it's those kind of projects that we're talking about with that investment fund.
That's very helpful to give it so people can picture it.
Yeah.
My last one, I'm excited about the cruise ship stuff. 80,000 people moving up to hopefully 400,000 as time goes on as a goal. What does that mean for taxpayers? Because, I've been on cruises and I have to pay a tax each time I go to a port. And I assume that money is paying for additional services. You mentioned infrastructure needs, garbage cleanup, things like that. For me, the taxpayer, what does having more people come to our city, like as a small business owner, yes, I completely see how that will help small businesses. How will that impact me? Like, are we going to see more people come? And taxes is a big topic right now. Having more people come to our community as tourists, how is that going to impact what I have to pay to the city?
So a couple things there. One is difficult to compare port to port.
Okay.
So even if you look at ports in Alaska who are actually active in investing into port infrastructure, that's their return on those investments and et cetera. So it's a little bit apples to oranges. Certainly there's no tax on any BC ports. But that being said, we have had initial discussions with the city. And I think we're very alive to if there are additional costs to the city. That's going to be a discussion we're going to be open to having. But that also comes down to making sure that everybody's clear on what roles and responsibilities are actually there and what's associated with that. When we talk about that growth, and just to use this year for an example. Our heaviest day this year was we did about 5,000 passengers in a day. We had two ships.
I remember that day.
And so when we talk about expansion, it's not about quadrupling the amount of people in a day, where we're suddenly dealing with 20,000 people and everything that incurs. It's actually about trying to smooth it out through a week. So if you've got a ship a day and you're bringing in 3,000 to 4,000 people and everybody can depend on that, what those services are. That's what we're actually looking at. And so even though we're talking about this big expansion in crews, what we're really looking to do is taking our busy days from this year and ensuring that they're consistent, right? Which has a whole bunch of benefits to it. But to be more specific to your point, obviously there's with increased business and new development, et cetera, there's an indirect element to a potential revenue opportunity there for the community. That being said, as I started out with, yeah, we are committed to having that conversation with local governments, ensuring that those roles and responsibilities are well planned out, and where there are significant costs incurred, let's take a look at what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think what we're really looking at is the economic impact of a thriving cruise tourism sector. It's a source of diversification of the local economy. It's a catalyst for a thriving small and medium sized business community in Prince Rupert, the expansion of retail and so forth. And also, I mean, we talk often about the challenges around residential development, but when's the last time we saw a commercial building develop? Well, you're only going to see new commercial buildings with a thriving, retail sector that drives that. And I think this could be a real catalyst for a lot of the vision that was crystallized in the 2030 plan, and seeing some of those development areas, city-owned property on the waterfront and otherwise, build out to be, additions to the tax roll within the Port of Prince Rupert and the community of Prince Rupert. So I think there's, we have a shared interest in a thriving local economy, and I think focusing on that small and medium-sized business sector as opposed to the big mega projects is part of a really resilient local economy, which will help the municipalities as well as everyone else.
Councillor Eady.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I just want to preface that with a couple of remarks. One is that I think as complex as the port operations are, equally complex is the relationship it has with the community. And I don't think we should dance around that. I think that there's a number of ways in which we've really appreciated the degree to which the port has stepped up to help us, particularly in conversations with senior governments. And also, the Community Investment Fund and some of the projects that you articulated are obviously much appreciated and well used by the community. So I want to acknowledge both those sides of where we are. My first encounter with the port as an institution was with the 2030 planning process. Ken, that's where you and I had some really good conversations. And that vision is important to the port because it helps you create the community that brings your labor force in. It's important in the city for too many reasons really to put in a short statement. And one of the foundations of that conversation with the 2030 plan was a population projection. The number I think that was floated around at that time was around 25,000 people as a possibility towards the end of the decade. I'm not sure how solid that number is still. I think that it fluctuates. I think there's been a number of things that have maybe emerged since then that might impact that. I think you guys will be aware of the element of automation in the conversations you've had with the labor force. And my own take on that, which is that to me it's completely understandable that port operations would seek to operate in as efficient a manner as they possibly can. That's the point of doing business. So I kind of get both sides of that, but it does impact maybe those numbers. The other piece, of course, is the downturn that we've experienced in the last year. I think that's hit some of the labor force pretty hard, but I also think it speaks to how sure we can be of the number in terms of population. So where I'm going with that is that what we do is we develop plans for what we hope to be an expanding community, and as a voice in the planning of that growth, I'm excited by that. I think that there's all kinds of reasons to be happy about that. But if I'm going to participate in planning a city or influencing its future, I would need to know that I'm influencing the right future for the right city. And so, for that reason, what I would like to see, and I'll invite your comment on this, what I'd like to see is as accurate as possible as we move forward. What do you think those numbers are going to be in terms of population growth? And how then does that influence what we have to do in terms of planning what we do? I've got another question afterwards, but maybe you can comment on that.
You're going to start with an easy one. Okay. So yeah, so going back to the Vision 2030 process, so in 2018, 2010.
Mr. Veldman, can I make sure that that mic's
Yeah.
closer, just so people at home can hear what?
So pre-pandemic, at that time, we did two things. One is we took the development portfolio that we had at that time, and applied some basic modeling to it with the assistance of an outside consultant as to what a traditional model would kick out in terms of what employment numbers look like. So that's what we kind of used as our base. We didn't have specific projects, but it was a good estimate for that. And we supplemented that with, as I said earlier in our earlier presentation, employment in this industry is driven very much by volumes. So we certainly had our volume forecast for that time based on the trajectory we were at, and I believe the forecast that we put forward based on that, and using some standard ratios of, how many people are in the community from a family perspective versus each job, et cetera, et cetera. And we had an estimate of about 19,000 people. And I think that ended up being sort of rounded into a 20,000 number sort of through the process. And so that's where that number came from. And I think that generally speaking, what we've seen through the pandemic and what we've seen even just in terms of our volumes through that period, is obviously we haven't seen the same trajectory of growth through those 5 years. And we've also seen, some investments that we thought would come quicker are now happening in the year 2023 and 2024. So are we going to get there on those levels? Yeah, probably. We haven't done the modeling since then in terms of what timing might look like. But it's probably longer in terms of by the end of the decade, tack another 5 years onto that. And that being said, we've also got a better idea as to what those actual operations might look like. And so as those investments are secured and those companies make decisions, we're going to have a better idea from that perspective as well. So I don't have a better number for you right now, other than to say that it's slower than what the forecast was in 2019. I don't think the automation question is necessarily that relevant to it at this point. Companies are going to make those decisions going forward, and some of that's going to be influenced by what technology looks like at the time. Quite frankly, the whole conversation around electrification and decarbonization is influencing some technology decisions as we go forward. So it would be unfair to speculate as to what that looks like. But generally speaking, investment dollars and volumes are what's going to drive employment, and employment is what's going to drive population. And if we're unsuccessful as a community in being able to attract that requisite labor force, it's going to influence some decisions along those lines, but that would be purely speculation at this point.
Councillor Adey.
Yeah, I appreciate that you can't give me a number. I think what I'm after is just a sense, a recognition of the importance that we keep updating each other along those lines in terms of forward-looking planning.
Absolutely.
And obviously you go on the best information possible. Yep. And as I suggested, I'm not here to question a company's choice in terms of how they manage technology. I think that's absolutely within that's their ballpark. Yep. Right. My second question, you covered a little bit of it, is the sort of dealing with your environmental footprint this is quite a prominent part of your presentation. I've seen it in the public communications prior to. I applaud it, coming from my perspective on those issues. So you've alluded to it a little bit. I guess I'm encouraged by all of the different initiatives, and I might ask you. I don't know whether you'll think this is a harder question than the other one or not. I'm interested in where you see that going long term. So I'm going to ask you to look into a crystal ball just for a moment, and I understand you can't. We won't tie you to any of this, even if we could.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, in 20 years, what does the Port of Prince Rupert look like? Not just the environmental perspective, but a broader perspective. What does it look like in terms of its place as a community partner? And what then do you think that might mean for the city of Prince Rupert?
Yeah, another easy question. 20 years from now, look, let's think about sort of what are some of our planning principles are and take it from there. If you look at our land use plan, one of the absolute key elements of it is that we've got a finite parcel of land to be able to develop from a port perspective, right? I mean, really, we're talking about some limited parcels on South Kane, from Ridley Island, we're talking about Laley Island. And as we have redeveloped largely brownfield sites over the last 15 years, and are now getting into much more capital intensive greenfield sites, there's an economic imperative to really maximize the use of land on each footprint that we have. And you'll see this in our land use plan. And that does a couple of things. I mean, number one, it's effective use of capital, right? If you can put, 20 tons through 20 acres as opposed to 20 million tons through 40 acres, right? That's going to have a big impact on your capital perspective. It's also going to have a big impact on your environmental footprint. So there's actually a couple of things working in tandem there. And so when you look at the type of developments that we're looking at right now, it's a matter of how do we maximize the amount of actual trade that's moving through very finite parcels of land. And that's going to be a key element to how we develop. And then going back to what we said earlier, to ensure that all of that really happens within a master plan of infrastructure that really ties it together. The investment that we made into the Fairview Ridley connector over the last few years fundamentally changed how we're going to be able to handle intermodal in particular going forward. And what that looks like is that it's all behind the fence and touches the community less than any port complex that you can find in North America. All of the development that we look at will be off highways, will be off municipal roads, will largely be out of sight from a community residential perspective, and that's not by accident. That is by design. But the more that we can develop that, the more that you're going to see tax base develop, the more you're going to see employment. Those employment wages are going to drive secondary and tertiary development from a small and medium enterprise perspective. The cruise piece is something that shapes more of the public facing element within the community. That's a fairly broad answer as to what 20 years look like from now. But it's probably relatively accurate from that perspective. How do we minimize our footprint, maximize the economic value, maximize the trade value that's actually coming through this port and being true to our mandate, and do it in a way that recognizes that we're within a community, that we're not looking to industrialize. We're looking to actually improve what lifestyle, quality of life, everyday aspects look like for its residents.
Councillor Eadie. Oh, sorry.
So I was going to take another shot at the same question. So what I see is a port of 100 million tons, doubling the capacity we have with the full build out of the port. I see a port that has the lowest carbon footprint, and decarbonization becomes a competitive advantage for the Port of Prince Rupert. That solidifies its place in as an enabler of Canadian trade. And I see a municipality, because of that build out, that has among the strongest industrial tax bases per capita anywhere in British Columbia. Simple as that. So when we talk about, building the Port of Prince Rupert, I think we often talk about building world-class port city alongside of that. That absolutely is our path. We're joined at the hip, and the next 2 decades will, I think, demonstrate that. So,
Thanks,
Councillor-
Eddie.
Done? Councillor Cunningham.
Hi, boys. First of all, do all ships coming into Prince Rupert have the ability to, I'll go with the easy one, have the ability to hook up to the electric?
No, not yet, but it's
Yeah.
increasing every year,
So,
right? And that's the important element to it.
Okay.
And to be clear, we've electrified Fairview. In the bulk shipping world, this is still a step away, but certainly from a container shipping perspective, this is and cruise for that matter. This is where it's those vessels that are on consistent routes that this really lends itself to.
so the grain and the coal aren't hooked up yet?
No.
Okay,
No.
so it's just the two, okay.
Yeah.
Now, the salt flats, how much did you put into that?
4 million, 3 million, $3 or $4 million.
Are you including that in the 17.5 million?
No, that was not a community investment fund
Yeah,
project.
okay.
That
Just-
project was specific.
Just curious.
The compensation that was
Okay.
actually part of the Fairview Connector Road.
yeah, it's probably important to point out when we look at habitat compensation projects,
Mhm. Yep.
wherever we can, we want to leverage that also to create a community asset. And I think the Salt Marsh project is an example of that, where we hit multiple objectives using the environmental compensation we had to do from a habitat comp and leveraging it for community
Yeah,
asset.
you're just trading one shoreline for another shoreline,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, on a 2-to-1 basis
Yeah.
too, though.
Yeah. Okay, now, quite a controversial topic in town is the cap. Do you want to explain that? There's two phases to the cap and how it came into existence and why it's being put forward, and the caps on the port tax.
Well, it depends on what depth you want to get into.
No, just the superficial.
yeah. No, so look, the province introduced the Ports Property Tax Act as part of the larger, what they called at the time, Ports Competitiveness Initiative in 2005. And to be really specific, it was a initiative by the province to introduce certainty and stability in terms of property taxation to potential investors that were looking at significant capital intensive projects as a way to secure that investment, not just in terms of very local economies, but also understanding that the provincial export industries that they serve. That investment was improving their market access for their supply chains, improving the competitiveness of those industries that they looked at global markets. And certainly I don't want to speak on behalf of the province because that was obviously their initiative, but I think that that's pretty public knowledge in terms of their goals in behind that legislation.
So, so the port tax was initially, when these investors came in, they understood it was only going to be there for 5 years. That was the initial provincial way of putting it, a tax break for
yes.
the first 5 years.
I believe
So
that's
any of
correct.
these investors that came in here in the beginning weren't expecting that after 5 years. But then it was put on for another 5 years and then in perpetuality. So it's basically became a very advantageous thing for people that have already been doing business and didn't expect that cap to be more than 5 years in existence. So they didn't really move here with, I think that legislation was very successful. It was a beautiful piece of legislation. It encouraged people to come here to begin with. But as it perpetuated itself, it encouraged them to be here. And that's the one damaging thing. If that cap wasn't in place after 5 years, a lot of the infrastructure problems in the city in that 15 years ago, 10 years ago, would have been started to be fixed up a little bit sooner, I think. But, that's just it. Like, when you talk about reinvestment of community and more taxes, right now our local businesses mill rate's higher than the cap rate. So, there's this handicap to local businesses that their supply chain is being affected, COVID, everything else, they're struggling. And on top of it, they have high tax. You know, and this is just one of the things that's in the rumor mill in Prince Rupert, you know, about the caps and everything. A lot of people don't really understand it, but the way I understand it is it was an incentive to get started here. But I don't think the first words out of Don Curcel's mouth when he was over in Japan and China was, you know, you're going to get a tax break for 5 years. It's the shorter distance shipping here, the time saved, containers, TUs going right on the train and going to wherever they have to. The advantages of this port are phenomenal for the port. And I don't think in the future those caps should stay in place. That's just my feeling. I think that would be a big thing to help the city. And I don't think it would hurt the cap. The port would be hurt by removing those caps. That's just my feeling on it personally. And, you know, I know Ken and I have had conversations about this quite a few times, but that's, you know, the fact that it was only going to be there for 5 years and it's still there. Why? You know, and I don't think you'll see any of these businesses pull up and leave if they lost the cap. They're very successful businesses right now. So that's, you know, that's it. It's, you know, and is there a tariff on vehicles going back and forth in the interconnector? Do they pay a toll?
No,
No?
no.
Okay.
Councillor Forster.
I had one more question.
Okay. Can I encourage you to direct your questions?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. And
I know what you
refer
look
to these
like. So,
gentlemen by
yeah.
their last name.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. It was brought to my attention that in 22 there was 31 ships came in on the cruise. Cruise ships came in. Is that correct?
We always think in terms of passengers as opposed to number of vessels. So
And there was 47 this year. And
sounds about right.
when some statistics I got from the museum is in 22 they had 23 feasts for excursions. This year they only had 12. So now that you've sold the rights to the excursions to Global, I'm wondering why one of our feature exhibits or attractions has actually gone down, considering when it was a free market before and the port was promoting the city versus
Mr.
that.
Feldman
It's
or
just
Mr.
just a little thing that I find rather an interesting little statistic.
So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the museum and some of the programs that they run, you know, through their facilities are marquee attractions within the Port of Prince Rupert as a cruise destination. So I can't comment specifically on the numbers, but certainly going forward, I mean, the museum is absolutely part of everything, you know, we represent as a cruise destination. For clarity, we didn't sell anything. We found a partner in Global Port Holdings, and given their capacities and global footprint, they've brought, you know, immediate value in how we look to develop the industry here. And together, I think, you know, when we look at the future of the excursion product, the tour packages, building upon, you know, Museum in Northern BC, North Pacific Cannery, and all of the natural assets we have in this area are going to be key to our success. So, but I can't comment on. I don't know why it would have been less this year versus last year.
Okay. Well, I think some of the excursions that have popped up since Global took over are fantastic. It's, you love seeing the dollies going by, and they're full usually when you see them. So that's a very successful part. And I know there's some other tours that have started, and they're slowly going to increase. We've got a lot to offer, and part of it, I think, is the museum and our Indigenous culture and history and artwork and that. And so I'm hoping that that aspect of tourism will be front and center.
Yeah, I'm down there as often as I can be to meet cruise ships, and I don't think there's, from a global port's point of view, a favoring of one over the other. They simply sold on board the ship, and it's what the customers are choosing. Councillor Forster.
Thank you. Really quickly, I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, about Truth and Reconciliation. We just saw a beautiful presentation, but I didn't see a lot, and maybe it's wrapped up in some of the community investments. how the port is addressing truth and reconciliation in their daily workings.
Who wants to take that? Mr. Stevenson? Mr. Veldman?
No, I'm happy to. And there's a lot of different ways we can point to that. You know, but let's start with the economic side. You know, we have agreements with a number of nations that ensure that nations share in our volume success from a financial perspective. We have procurement obligations that ensure that literally hundreds of millions of dollars are, in a preferential sense, are provided to local nations. And what we have seen, whether that be the connector road, yes, whether that be the connector road, whether that be the export logistics platform, we literally have local nations and their joint ventures building the port. And even from an employment perspective, you know, almost 39% of the local labor force involved with the port. So we're talking about 19, 20 different employers. 39% are Indigenous. When you consider that, when you look at the 15 plus population of the city of Prince Rupert, 35% are Indigenous within that. So in fact, we're not just mirroring, there's actually an exceedance. So from an economic perspective, there's some really strong proof points as to what that looks like. You know, but of course, reconciliation is broader than just that. You know, and we've also got legal obligations in terms of consultation, etc. You know, we have, I think, very good relationships in multiple nations within this region in terms of leadership to leadership communications, being in communities and engaging with those populations, being in community, not just from a, you know, being in Metlakatla, but also recognizing that there is a significant population within the community. So when we talk about community relations and Indigenous relations, there's a very, very strong overlap and intermesh from that perspective. But even from our organizational perspective, every single employee within our organization has received extensive training about Indigenous culture, what that looks like from a Port Authority perspective. Every new onboard receives that same training. You know, we host a number of internal exercises and initiatives every year that involve our staff. And even to the point of, you know, we've got curated libraries of specific books. We call them books still if they're not in paper, but books that we encourage our staff to dive into. And all of those elements, I think, are really significant in terms of understanding the history, understanding the culture, understanding our role as a port authority in terms of engaging with those communities. And I say all of that, and let me emphasize, there are still miles to go. It is not a job done. But we are proud of our efforts in that area. And we'll continue to build on them in all of those various ways as we go forward.
Thank you very much.
Great. Listen, there we go. Councillor Skelton Morvan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Veldman and Mr. Stevenson for your presentation and for your team coming by. And a piece that kind of jumps out at me is, you know, outside of the Crown obligation that's put in place for impact benefit agreements, consultation and process, as well as the community investment funds, where is there a tool where we can try to develop a significant development, especially around, you know, there's been various groups in town talking about a cultural center. Once upon a time, there was an entity called the North Coast Tribal Council. There was some unity on that front. There was the deal was on the table and it kind of fell apart due to disagreements between parties, between nations, bands, and leadership. Where, I guess, on your side of things, what is available when it comes to significant capital projects, especially when it comes to making the town a little bit more reflective of the territory that we reside on.
Well, I think
Mr. Veldman, go ahead.
our most significant tool is the community investment fund. We're certainly not limited to that, but yeah, that fund was created specifically for those kind of projects, and to be able to develop those kind of partnerships going forward. So yeah, we're absolutely open to those kind of conversations, and this is where it starts to overlap with things, well, quite frankly, like cruise, right? Where the sustainability, I mean, it's one thing to build something. It's another thing to be able to sustainably maintain operations of centers like that. Sometimes that's the bigger challenge than actually building it. And that's where when you start to look at things like cruise, like an expanding population, like a healthy economy, those are going to be the things that actually, maintain the day-to-day operations of those kind of projects. So part of it is getting them built, but part of it is also understanding that what we're doing in terms of our mandate and building our business. There are some direct alignments with those kind of initiatives as well.
One more, Councillor Skelton Morvan? Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, no, and those are great. I guess outside of those pieces, like, is there? I guess. I mean, there's obviously an allotted amount when it comes to your board and things like that, but are there still opportunities on the table that reflect where we were at during the times of the North Coast Tribal Council? There are some conversations about where that might be at. I mean, at the time it was more terminals and there's other pieces that were kind of in the puzzle before DP World had become the primary tenant. But looking at those pieces, like there's a lot of momentum on the ground now for development of a pretty significant center. Where does the PRPA sit at that point? And I guess what other tools outside of those? I mean, because again, there's some parameters around the community investment fund. I'm not familiar with the caps or how that works for different funds for different projects. But when it comes to a significant investment, especially with the primary benefits being reaped off of the resources around us, essentially, and the traffic flowing through here, what does that look like either for a large capital investment or even recurring funds that allow for cultural programming and other things that would continue to be eventually self-revolving, but where does the PRPA kind of, I guess, one is stand on that, but are there opportunities there, I guess, on your side of the table?
Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah, well, I think, when we talk about, let's just start with cruise tourism, I think the Indigenous culture and history of this area needs to be front and center, and I think we're always interested in exploring how we can strengthen, that profile, that presence, and frankly, the economic opportunity available to the surrounding Indigenous communities and those Indigenous members of the city of Prince Rupert proper. I know that I've personally been involved in exploring the development of cultural assets, cultural center, on numerous occasions with both Metlakatla and Lac aux Lambs. Once with the assistance of Tatara White out of it was Maori. He was doing some work and had been involved with Te Puia and in New Zealand. I think, as Ken mentioned, it's always a question of capital investment versus how is it operationally sustaining. And I think we're more than interested in exploring that. If there's an opportunity for partnership, we'd be all ears. I haven't heard any specific initiative of late. I'm certainly more than interested in pulling some past studies off the shelf and see if there's a new relevance. Frankly, scale of visitors is key to making all these things viable, and I think it's a good time to be looking at that. The reference to the North Coast Tribal Council, I don't have any sense of that. I was certainly familiar with it and had some opportunities to engage with that group back in the 90s, but I'm not aware of anything happening on that front. So.
Great, thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Positive thing, like, we've had a lot of industry in this town over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And when you look around the town, there's no legacy from any of them. And the port has a legacy it started, which I think is great. Like you see your sign on Rushbrook, Salt Flats, things like that. It's nice to see. Don't get me wrong about it's not all negative. I think there's a lot of positives there, and I think in the future we're going to work better together. I think it's happening. It's just that These are questions that pop up as politicians get them on the street. And trust me, they're hard to answer sometimes because we don't have the answers and people expect answers from us. But one thing that I've often wondered about is Alaska, I believe, when it comes to cruise ships, has a head tax. And some of that goes to the communities for the effect that the cruise ships have on it. Is there anything like that happening in BC?
Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah, I'm not aware of passenger head tax anywhere in Canada. You know, there is a state of Alaska head tax. I mean, it started with the individual communities having head taxes, and the state intervened because it was a bit Wild West. But the model is different in Alaska. You know, both the municipality and the borough have a role in actually the development and operations of the infrastructure to support, you know, the handling of ships and, you know, passenger infrastructure and so forth. So that's how that head tax is governed through the state of Alaska, and it's there to actually ensure that there's a mechanism for that infrastructure to be reinvested in. You know, I think when we look at the growth and expansion of the cruise sector, we're mindful of you know, the role of the port, frankly, the role of a partner like GPH versus the role of the municipality. And our intent is to see those infrastructure investments without creating a you know, a necessary investment by the municipality and to contribute to ensure that it's sustainable going forward.
So how does the port make money off cruises? By the docking fees, or is there a per capita per passenger or anything like that?
We've got a concession with Global Port Holdings, who is now the operator, and the concession involves, you know, them having the rights to operate the terminal, and then they're also involved in destination development and the ShoreX program coordination, everything else. Our commercial agreements with them are simply based upon, you know, the depreciated asset value, the written down asset value, and over time, you know, getting a, you know, a fee and I'd call it non-commercial rate of return on that asset over time. We've never made any money on cruise, and compared to, you know, other port developments, it is very much a community development to create an economic stimulus. So.
So I'm going to wrap it up. We've actually given an inordinate amount of time, and appropriately so. And I want to pull back the veil a little bit. Some time ago, there was a report written about the change of tone between the city of Prince Rupert and the port of Prince Rupert. And that, you know, I'd like people to understand what's happening when they're not able to be in the room, and just put that out in front of everybody. The port of Prince Rupert, first of all, it's my core belief, and I think anybody that doesn't see it is blind, is that without the city of Prince Rupert, there's simply no port of Prince Rupert, and without the port of Prince Rupert, there's not much of a city of Prince Rupert. You know, if you'd gone back in the 80s and said that statement, you'd be wrong. In the 80s, we had the pulp mill, and we had fishing plants, and we had all kinds of other things. Today, the city of Prince Rupert and the port of Prince Rupert absolutely are critical to each other's existence. And I think we operate that way. I can tell you that in every major initiative where we are pushing on government, the port of Prince Rupert has been beside us, whether that's federally or provincially. And we are singing from the same song sheet where we absolutely can. There are few places where we can't. And you know, I say to people all the time, that's a mature relationship. That's the relationship I have with my wife. We work on a lot of things together, and there's a few things that we acknowledge we just can't. We're not 100% aligned, and I'd like to be crystal clear about that tonight, just so there's just no doubt in anybody's mind. I was in a room with the Premier, with our staff and others, where Mr. Stevenson was present, and he said to the Premier, as clear as a bell, the city of Prince Rupert needs to be made whole around port taxes. Now, he has a different view on the range of options that might include from us, but we are absolutely aligned. The city of Prince Rupert needs to be made whole around taxes on terminals, right? That can happen in a number of ways. It could be by the province upping the grant, and then we go on our merry way, right? So I want people to understand that, and that the tone may have changed. It may have changed. I don't know that it's changed. I'll let you decide whether it's changed. But the objectives are just the same as they've always been. And we disagree on PILT. Big, there's a big announcement. We disagree on PILT. Port thinks they should pay less tax. We think they should pay more. But one of the beautiful things that happens every time they announce a project is there's less land left in the PILT. Right? The $750 million expansion of the export logistics part means land's moving out of the PILT into the tax side, right? And so, and we're 100% aligned on that, right? And so, and we're going through the process of coming to an answer where somebody will tell us what the right number is on PILT. And then in a whole lot of other areas where we have mutual interest in proceeding, we are proceeding. We're finding ways to get things done because I go back to where I started. Absolutely critical to the existence of Prince Rupert and the growth of Prince Rupert is the Port of Prince Rupert, and absolutely critical to the Port of Prince Rupert. It's why we're in Ottawa talking about pipes like that. And when, and I'll say when, we are successful finally on our DMAF application, which would be $82 million, we will include you in the celebration. Because you've been and I'm looking across behind you to Kevin, who I've personally been in Ottawa meetings with, and the man is a force to be reckoned with. And our own Director Pucci has benefited greatly from the working relationship. And so I just want people to know that we're aligned on so many issues, and there's a couple of things where can't quite align, but we're even within them where we can align, we're aligned. Is that fair? Like I'm not asking you to comment or not comment. It's entire. I'll give you space if you want, but that's. I just want people to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor Pond. But I would go further to say the only time that we've ever accomplished something in this community, certainly I've been here for 26 years of what is a long history, is where we have been aligned, and we've both put our shoulder against the same priorities and both benefited from them. So, I echo your comments. We're aligned in much more ways than we're not. So.
Absolutely. And we're mature enough to figure out our ways even where we can't quite get. Right? Good. All right. With that, thank you very much, gentlemen, for that update. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Indeed.
You are not obliged to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we will not take offense if you determine there's something better you could do with the next few minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We will move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, there are 4 sets of minutes. There's 3 reports, and the recommendation all the items on the consent agenda
Mr. Mayor,
be approved as requested. Yes.
if I can make a recommendation, that it appears that our format this time has a slight error in it.
Okay.
We would recommend that before you get to consent agenda, we include a public comments
You're right.
period.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So normally on my agenda, it would say that this is an opportunity for members of the public come forward, ask any question of any item that's on this evening's agenda, or make comment rather to any item that's on this evening's agenda. So if any member of the public would like to come forward at this time, they're more than welcome to do that.
I have comments on there.
It was on the agenda. Come on forward. Come, but you have to come to the microphone and identify yourself.
But they're gone, so they can't reply.
You won't be able to ask them a question if that's your intention. So you could follow them out the door and ask them the question.
Okay.
But you need to sit down and identify yourself first if you're going to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Diana Caputo. I've been a resident of Prince Rupert for 30 years, and I stumbled in on the presentation from the port, guys. So if I was able to ask them a question, I had two here. One was around the greenwashing of their carbon tax agenda. I would say that if they have ships coming in that are high polluting, then they should be on the onus of the ship to not be high polluting in our port, as our hydro is in fact fired by fuel. So what is the way up on firing our hydro fuel to run their boats?
So our hydro is not fuel. We're on hydroelectricity from dams, except for when the power goes out. If there's an interruption, then there is a short term when they run the natural gas. But we're hydroelectric.
From dams now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would the draw be on their ships to our community? Would we be short? Would we have blackouts or grayouts? That would be another question. So further on to that,
yeah,
I find it very funny that they are concerned about our coast and our environment when they've displaced our wolf population and the other wildlife out there. So how can you be concerned about environment and letting the wolves run through our towns, eating our animals? So that's part one, or my first question. The second one was regarding the TEU. Last year was a very fruitful year for our longshoremen. This year, not so much. When will we get that back? Or do we tell our longshoremen that they're losing their houses? And then where do our mill rates go? Because now those guys are not paying their taxes. To continue on to that, when they distract us with cruise ship splendor, those jobs are minimum wage jobs that are seasonal, not year-round traded jobs.
So, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you again. You're absolutely right about seasonal, but I happen to know that those jobs are paying $30 and $40. I can't speak to which jobs. I know many of the tour operator jobs are $30 and $40 an hour.
So the
Not
rest
minimum
of the
wage.
question is, what is the return of investment?
Yeah.
What is our income return on the jobs that we are gaining through tourism, which he already said that we aren't getting any, the port isn't getting any income from those cruise ships, versus what we will be losing through the containers, not bringing in the same income. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. And that's exactly why we have this public comment time. Any other member of the public who would like to come forward at this time and address council?
Well, neat. Nicholas Blackwater, Tsimshian Kachis. Our family's been on the coast for about 14,000 years. And so yeah, very exciting what's going on. We're in the process of kind of rebuilding all of those cultural prerogatives in which are being uprooted on the coast. And it's interesting that the Port Authority gentleman on the left here mentioned something about studies and such. Well, we've been doing basically our own private study for decades now, and I'd just like to give honor to the Tsimshian and the tribes which inhabit those areas. And if we could give more credence towards perhaps the Tsimgiyet, the real declared people of those lands, and underneath them there'll be a Manlikiyet, a couple houses underneath them. So yeah, there's 9 tribes as it is right now. And where are the Tsimgiyet? A lot of them themselves, I could tell you, are confused as to exactly where their own lands are, where they belong. Some of them haven't feasted, so they feel they can't exercise their rights or exert their authority within their own lands, so there's that problem. But anyhow, as a representative of one of the royal houses of the Tsimshian, you know, I would just like to say we are interested in what's going on out here, reconnecting with this land. And all the business aside and numbers and volumes and such, I think it would just be nice to have representatives of the Lachute in which business is being conducted. And as far as the cruise thing goes, you know, take of it what you will, the internet stuff, but there was a rather scathing review of it. And I think culture can offer a good opportunity in that way. Hatley Sul-Yansk, for instance, perhaps harvesting off the land and then bringing it into the economic sphere where we could both generate value for one another and acknowledge the land and whoever it belongs to. So yes, very interesting. And all these fine things going on. Nistoich, he's one of the Likigiyet of Gitwilgots. So that's the land we currently reside on. Clarence Nelson, I believe. Gitwilgots, Sasach, that's the first one forward. And then I'm not sure if you'll actually hear this outside of our tiny circle in which is conducting these research and compiling all this data, you know, but those are the real people. Thanks so much for having this and the opportunity for community to be involved. I mean, people should, whether they're part of this cultural prerogative or a municipality sense, just a Canadian citizen wishing for better opportunities for the cities. So anyhow, does that make any sense?
Yeah.
To what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it. Oh, and Kevin Stunder. Mr. Stunder.
Hello, am I live? Can you hear me?
You are.
Thank you, Mayor Pond and Council. Just wanted to let you guys know I'm here just to say hello. I'm represented later in your council agenda with a variance application we're seeking for our Drake Heights project. We spent a little bit of time with your planning department going through, and you know, we have 2 variances that you'll be reviewing. One's for a setback, one's for parking. And again, these are things that we're trying to do. We don't have the easiest economic climate for building homes right now, but with interest rates and build costs and stuff like that. But we're hoping that this project can receive a go-ahead. Would be our goal for next year. And, you know, these variances would help in that capacity and stuff like that. For those of you that don't know me, I'm with Pacific Aurora Construction. We've done about 14 homes in Prince Rupert in the last 5 years, as well as we're working with Northern Health, we're working with BC Housing and working in Terrace currently with LNG Canada in providing homes. Anyway, we'll just leave it at that for now. I think that your planning department did a great job exactly expressing what we're trying to do inside sort of the planning notes in your council agenda. I don't have anything to add to that other than the fact that since we have the whole city block in that area, that most of the variances, we're the direct beneficiary and we're the only ones to have any pro or cons to with it, since our block doesn't have any neighbors within its own parcel and stuff like that. But I'll look forward to the public hearing, which I think will become upcoming early in the new year. And of course, at that point, I'll be wide open to help any questions or queries you have on it. But that's all for now. Great meeting tonight. It was great to see the port presentation. I have lots of questions, but I'll leave that alone.
Thank you, Mr. Stunder.
Thank you.
All right. Then we'll go back to the consent agenda with the recommendation that all the items on the consent agenda be approved as requested. I'll note in there is a report from the Director of Economic Development and Transportation with regards to the business facade improvement grant, and also a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services about council resolutions, as well as a planning report that's also in there. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Randhawa, Councillor Adey, any discussion? Councillor Cunningham. Can you use your microphone, please?
The business facade improvement program,
Yes.
is that open to nonprofits also?
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, I'll defer the question to Mr. Director Venditelli.
Director Venditelli. Did you hear the question?
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Very faintly.
It is open to nonprofit. Yes, Councillor Cunningham.
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We then move on to reports. Report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to the council meeting schedule, with the recommendation that council approves the 2024 council meeting schedule as presented. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Forrester. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have a report from the Director of Development Services and Manager of Communications, Engagement, Social Development regarding the summary of reconciliation roundtable and committee format, with a recommendation that council directs staff to form an Indigenous Relations Committee following the general terms of reference provided in this report, with the final terms of reference to be adopted by the committee, and I'm going to add this, subject to council approval. Okay, which is in fact in the document, it talks to that, so it's not running against the report, but it's just clarifying. Councillor Forster, moving it? Moving, seconded. Councillor Randhawa. Any discussion? Councillor Adey.
First of all, I'm encouraged to see this initiative moving forward. I think that it's extremely important, and I think that the conversation with the port indicates that it's an initiative that really touches on everybody and multiple institutions and community levels. So I think that's fabulous that it's moving forward. I wish it well. I also think that it's really important that once it's launched, that it have the independence from us to operate in the way that it sees fit. The one question I have around it is we have planning for the coming year. So there's, I think, a fairly clear outline of what it looks like over the course of the next year, and then really a speculative reference to beyond 2024. And so I'm wondering, under the key objectives, you have 3 there, whether there should be reference as a key objective to consideration of the longer term model. I'm thinking particularly in terms of specific things like if we understand that reconciliation is not a 1-year project, what then might the terms of membership on the committee be? What models of funding might exist beyond 2024? And also what, acknowledging that it will be a longer term project, what does that mean in terms of longer term objectives as well?
Manager Stewart.
Sure. So to be frank, I left it relatively vague so that the committee could help us to weigh in a little bit on the terms of reference and to have that come back to council so that they can be more of a part of the process of identifying what those terms of reference should be. That's also kind of why we went forward with kind of roundtable informal events to collect information from the community and make sure that we were moving forward with their input. So I think I would look to the committee membership once it's established to determine what they think the length of terms for the membership should be. I also, just because the way the committee is funded for the first year, it's funded by grant, and I didn't want to fetter council's budgetary ability going forward. So we can come forward with a recommendation about what council does or does not do with the budget for the committee going forward, and council can make the determination from there. I think is likely the appropriate protocol.
Councillor Skelton Morven.
I guess when it comes to structure, I mean, obviously I'm in support of the motion. I just one piece just around language around, could we decolonize the word committee and use something along the lines of a reconciliation leadership circle?
Sure. So at the point of advertising, we are going to call it an Indigenous Relations Committee, but
Yes,
there
yes.
was the premise also within the committee to be able to define itself as the name, and I can definitely take that piece on side that the word committee in itself is a bit bureaucratic potentially.
Perfect. Yeah, no problem. And I guess the secondary question is, can I get myself on this committee, but not in a stipend role? Because I know that there is honorarium for folks. I obviously wouldn't be unpaid. This would just be on my particular, because I'm just trying to find the structure on how we're utilizing this. If there's anything that, or is there anything that precludes me from taking part in that particular committee or leadership circle?
Manager Stewart.
At this point, we had made it based on community members. Council is free to amend the way that the committee is structured. It's proposed as a member or as a community member committee rather than a council member committee, just to kind of, I guess, to make it more freely open to community members and to not have that kind of regimentation in place. But again, it is a committee of council, so you're free to determine and change that if you'd like.
Councillor Randawa.
Yeah, just like to thank for the report. Very well done. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciated the opportunity to engage in some of this learning with the people that chose to participate. To Councillor Skelton Morven's idea, I wonder if an option would be to take that to the committee to allow them to make that type of a determination themselves, versus us approaching it from a bureaucratic perspective where we're contemplating adding people to a committee without the committee actually having that type of an input. I wonder if that would sort of meet what Councillor Skelton Morven is suggesting, while also starting to look towards the entire intent behind Truth and Reconciliation, making it not our choice, but up to the committee. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Fair enough. Councillor Skelton Morven.
Yeah, I agree with that piece, and I think there's some notion to that. I guess kind of coming in with at least some sort of framework and foundation, and that's exactly what we've done. And I just wanted to give a special thanks to Director Pope as well as Director Stewart for their work on this file, especially in the framework that led to kind of the creation of this. And I myself have taken part in a lot of those gatherings and discussions. And for me, I guess there's a way, I mean, I'm ultimately flexible to however council wants to proceed with this. I mean, for me, myself being the only Indigenous representation on this council seems quite fitting that I'd be a part of those discussions and having those conversations. But that's just, my own 2 cents there. It's, very seldomly do we have urban representation like this to be able to build those bridges, have those conversations, and open up that dialogue. So, I mean, for us to, I mean, ultimately, again, I am sitting in an urban seat in a colonial government structure. So I'm more than flexible, again, to come to, I guess, the invite of the committee if that's so they desire. But I mean, it's one of those pieces that where I look at some of the structures of other committees that we have regarding, you know, particular assets in the community or sectors of service and things like that, that there is a council member on that committee or board or however you want to structure it. So I don't see it being conflictual. I see there's some pieces here that we have a very small window of opportunity over the next 3 years in this term that I am here in this seat as that representation and being able to build those bridges. So again, I mean, if I propose an amendment, if there's a piece there that's, I mean, there'd also be probably separate motions to a point as well. But I mean, again, it's just, it's a matter now of, you know, what this looks like for the community, but also the members of the committee that want to partake.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
I tend to agree with Councillor Forrester that we'll let the committee decide. This is about reconciliation and it's their ownership. And you know, even the word committee is a colonial type word. And for us to be placing somebody from our council on that committee with no choice from the committee, I think is the wrong way to start this to begin with. I agree with a lot of the things Councillor Skelton Morvin's saying, but at the same time, I think it's very important that this committee, I hate using that word, but it's the word we're using right now. This committee is going to be made up of people that are really interested in reconciliation and what happens in our community. Not that you're not, Mr. Councillor, but I think the committee has to have ownership of that committee. And for us as a colonial bureaucracy, if you want to say, saying that we're going to place somebody on that, I just don't think it's the right route to go personally. But that's just a colonialist talking about it.
Councillor Adey.
Yeah, I won't repeat some of what's been said, although I agree. I think to me the key concept is to separate the committee and allow it to be independent of council. And I'm confident that if presented with this issue, then the group would be able to make an independent decision that makes sense for them in terms of what their path forward seems to be to them. But I think the separation of the two bodies is really important in terms of allowing for that independence to flourish.
Thank you. All right. We've got a motion in front of us as written in your binder, but also I'll note that it adds subject to council approval and in the at the end of the recommendation. We've got a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Does anybody want to raise a recommendation to Director Stewart around, you know, asking the committee whether they want a member of council, or do you want to just walk away with that as a concept? Like, what's
can I raise a recommendation? And just, I guess, point out the irony of non-Indigenous members of council suggesting it'd be too colonial to put the Indigenous member of council on a committee. If we could die by irony, I'd be very concerned. But I guess for me, I would raise a recommendation if there's a way to approach that so that it's the option is there. If that's not how they want to proceed, they want to keep those entities separate and everything else, I'm more than fine with that.
So is that, sorry,
I'm agreeing with the raise.
A motion, is that a motion to have the committee consider whether they want a member of council to join? Sorry.
Yes, that would be correct.
Is that a seconder?
I'll make that motion that the committee can make up their mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Forrester. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item number 6C. It's a report from the Director of Development Services with regards to variance permit 2324 on Drake Crescent development, with a recommendation that council approves proceeding with the statutory notification process for development variance permit 2324. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Adie, Councillor Forster. Any discussion? Questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. We move on to a report from the planning department. Oh, wait. Back up. Report from, planning with regards to development variance permit 2325, 807 Alfred Street. That council proceed with final approval for the development variance permit DVP 2325. Councillor Randhawa, is there a seconder? Councillor Cunningham, any discussion? Councillor Adie, I got an idea what's coming here.
Was there any public feedback on this?
Thank you. There was no comments received to the positive or the negative on this DVP.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Moving on to the report from planning with regards to temporary use permit number 2301 for 935 2nd Avenue West. That council proceed with final approval for temporary use permit number 2301. That would be for goats at the Moby Dick. Councillor Cunningham is moving the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Forster, any discussion? Councillor Forster.
Thank you. Did we receive any feedback from any members of the public?
Oh, you know what? That was sneaky, but okay. Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My office received no comments about this matter to the positive or the negative.
Councillor Adie.
I'm actually surprised by that, but that's okay. I've received some feedback on the streets, and maybe my colleagues have as well. I can't say that I look at this without some reservations, and my reservations are attached to the concerns around the health of the animals. I am happy to see that there's some attention paid to that in terms of conditions associated with this temporary use permit. I guess my specific concerns at the moment, just based on not knowing pieces of information, are around food supply in winter. I understand that the goats are to keep the weeds and the grass down. I'm assuming that there is alternative food supply during the time of the year when vegetation isn't growing. And the other point would be in terms of oversight, monitoring the health of the animals, whether that is something that depends upon the owners or observers, or whether there's something more official in that regard, particularly around the hooves, because the condition of the hooves with livestock in this area is the reason for this debate in the first place.
Dr. Buchan, have you any comment?
Your Worship, I'll defer the question to Director Pope.
Director Pope, our goat expert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Within the permit, we do state animal welfare requirements, and so the permit can be removed upon not meeting those requirements. I believe we also include a requirement for reporting on the welfare of the animals, but I can take that back. I believe it should be in the council package.
Councillor
Okay,
Cunningham,
thank you.
or 80, sorry, Cunningham's next.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Councillor Cunningham.
In the last round of the goat round, I believe the owner of Moby Dick had indicated to us that a vet was going to be available to examine it from Terrace. I also had some inquiries about whether they're going to be vaccinated or not, and I talked to her and she said yes, they're going to be vaccinated. So, and I think they're only going to be here for the summer. I don't anticipate them being here in the winter, but I don't know that question. But you know, I think they'll be well taken care of, and there'll be too many people watching for them not to be taken care of.
Director Pope, did you have any other comments to that?
Just that I would say the letter from the vet was included in the original council package. It's provided.
Councillor Forster.
Sorry, just really quickly, there are also some really great guidelines on livestock such as goats on the BCS-BCA website.
Excellent. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have bylaws. Item number 7A, City of Prince Rupert 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw 3526. Recommendation that council gives fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw number 3526 2023. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Forster. Any discussion? Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciated this. I just have a question. When I looked through table 10B under bylaw enforcement, it doesn't seem like there's every year a bit of an increase like I saw with many of the other lines. In fact, it looks like for 2023 it was 363, 2024 445, then it drops down in 2025 to 441, then 2026 goes up to 446, and then 2027 to 452. So I'm just curious, is that an anomaly, or is there something specific happening to change that?
Thank you. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I'll defer the question to Director Bobbin.
Director Bombin.
Thank you. So this is the first time that we've actually broken the bylaw department out, and so there was a minor mistake in the escalation only in the future years, but we're going to fine tune it in the springtime should there be any material changes that need to be advanced for a budget amendment. Presently, it's in a minor amount and immaterial to make the change at the moment.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Item number 7B is from the Director of Development Services with regards to City of Prince Rupert OCP Amendment Bylaw number 35272023 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3528 with a recommendation that Council give first and second reading of Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3527, and that Council consider the proposed Official Community Plan Amendment in conjunction with the financial plan and any liquid waste management plans in effect, and that Council give first and second reading of Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3528, and that Council proceeds to public hearing. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councilors Ady and Randawa, any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. And then the additional item, the late item, item number 7C, it is the 2023 financial plan, 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3517 for the period 2023 to 2027.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, backing up. Yep.
3525.
3525. Yeah, thanks. I just realized I was reading from the wrong line. Thank you very much. 3525. With the following. Sorry, that the recommendation is that the bylaw receive fourth and final reading. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councilors Ady and Randawa, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. All right. And we move on to comments and questions from members of council. Councillor Forster.
Chatty today. I wanted to share my genuine enthusiasm about the loss of Rosie's. The lot looks amazing. I drove by it the other day with one of my friends, and her exclamation of excitement was pretty wonderful. So hooray, Christmas came early. I think that was the joke we had last time.
Yeah.
I do wonder about the Angus apartments, because I know that was another part of it, and I've seen there's been some movement. Should we expect it to be as quick as Rosie's? I think we talked about it last council meeting, and we were hoping by the end of the year, and that came quite quickly. So,
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too was hoping it would be very quick. There's some additional challenges that the Angus apartments are presenting, so we're going to still be taking it down. It is just coming down a little more slowly than Rose's. Work started today. It is proceeding but slowly, and residents will see progress as the days go on, but it will be down.
Thanks. Just one more time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for getting that down.
Yes. Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. People are asking questions like, so we used to have ICBC office here, and then when you have accident, they used to estimate, and then you can take to body shop, and then they shut down their office here, and body shop used to do estimate and fix your vehicles. So now I heard like that body shop is shutting down too.
Yeah.
So now people have hard time probably go to terrace. Next one is over there.
Yeah.
So you have accident, already stressful situation, then you have to make arrangement to go to terrace. So people want to know like they're paying insurance, everything, and so we can write down letter to ICBC to find out what's their next steps, right? Some like once a week or twice a week, one of the just estimator come here, and if any problem, or what kind of options people of Prince Rupert have now for in that events.
Yeah. So the direction towards staff is to get a hold of ICBC and find out what their plans are to provide service to the people of Prince Rupert now that we've lost the one and only remaining body shop, but not so much the body shop itself, but they were the claim center now for ICBC. And so if you could find out for all of us, that'd be great. Councillor Adey.
I have a couple of questions. One follow-up, first one on the Angus Apartments and Roses, and that is with respect to the cost of demolition. My understanding is that part of the punitive aspect of this, the original intent is that we say, you got to do something, you got to do something, and then if they don't do it, we do something and we bill you. I'm just wondering where that sits in terms of both of those locations. And I have a couple of questions after that.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to Roses, we will be billing the current property owner. They will have until the end of the year to make payment. If it's not made by December 31st, it will roll on to property taxes in accordance with the regulations to do so. With respect to the Angus Apartments, the City of Prince Rupert is now the owner of those two sites. So we will be bearing the cost until such time as we aren't the owners.
Councillor Adey.
My second question is around building off of the presentation that we had with the port and what I think was a broad conversation that was worth having. I'm wondering if a similar opportunity might be presented to us in terms of City West.
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, if you're contemplating a specific presentation from City West to Council on their initiatives, I would say we could make that request of them.
Excellent. Would you do that on our behalf? Thank you. Any other comments or questions from Councillor Adey?
Sorry, I think I said two.
Okay,
there's
sorry.
three. It's aging process. My last question is around, perhaps timely, it's around preparation for winter roads. I think 2 years ago we had a very challenging year, and I think a lot of it's just driven by the weather cycles. But it caused a lot of community conversation and some post-winter reflections. I'm just wondering where we are at this point in terms of preparing for what may come between now and the next council meeting.
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, that is a fine question, one to which I do not have a direct response to, other than we will see if we can get a response from the director when he's off of vacation, and we will ask for that to be sent out to council for their information.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Forrester, Councillor Randhawa, all in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Meeting adjourned.